Atam yan medena gyana nichyavarna kamarupena konteya dushpure nanalena cha. Translation. Thus, in man's spirit consciousness is covered by his internal enemy in the form of lust, which would never satisfy and which burns like fire. Text 40. Indriyani nodhir asya adhisthana uchate etervyayadyesha yanam avrityate. Translation. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, which veils the real knowledge of the living entity that we will pursue. Text 41. Tasmatvam indriyan yadau niyamya bharatar shabha papmanam prajahya enam jnana vijnana nashanam. Translation. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Text 42. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param manaha manasastu parabudhir yo budhe paratastu sa. Translation. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Text 43. Evam budhe param budva samstabhyatmanam atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kama rupam durasadam. Translation. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind, and intelligence, one should control the lower self by the higher self, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Chapter 4, entitled Transcendental Knowledge. Text 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivaspate Yogam Proktavam Aham Avyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manur Ikshvakve Bravit. Translation. The Blessed Lord said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god, Vivasvan, and Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ishvaku. Text 2. Evam parampara praptam imam rajar shayo vidu sakalene he mahata yogo nashta parantapa. Translation. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it appears to be lost, as it is, appears to be lost. Text 3. Sa eva yamaya tedya yoga prokta puratanaha bhakto si me sakha cheti rahasyam hyetad uttamam. Translation. That very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you because you are my devotee as well as my friend. Therefore, you can understand the transcendental mystery of this science. Text 4. Arjuna uvacha aparam bhavato janma param janma vivaspataha katam etad vijjan iyam tvam edau proktavan iti. Translation. Arjuna said, the sun god Vivasvan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? Text 5. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bahuni me vyatitani Janmani Tavacharjuna Tanyaham Veda Sarvani Natvam Veta Parantapa. Translation. The Blessed Lord said, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. Now we can go back to text 38, and I'll read the translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai. Text 38, translation. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, similarly, the living entity is covered by different degrees of this lust. Purport. There are 3 degrees of covering of the living entity by which his pure consciousness is obscured. This covering is but lust under different manifestations, like smoke in the fire, dust on the mirror, and the womb about the embryo. When lust is compared to smoke, it is understood that the fire of the living spark can be a little perceived. In other words, when the living entity exhibits his Krishna consciousness slightly, he may be likened to the fire covered by smoke. Although fire is necessary where there is smoke, there is no overt manifestation of fire in the early stage. This stage is like the beginning of Krishna consciousness. The dust on the mirror refers to a cleansing process of the mirror of the mind by so many spiritual methods. The best process is to chant the holy names of the Lord. The embryo covered by the womb is an analogy illustrating a helpless position. For the child in the womb is so helpless that he cannot even move. This stage of living condition can be compared to that of the trees. The trees are also living entities, but they have been put in such condition of life by such a great exhibition of lust that they are almost void of all consciousness. The covered mirror is compared to the birds and beasts, and the smoke-covered fire is compared to the human being. In the form of a human being, the living entity may revive a little Krishna consciousness, and if he makes further development, the fire of spiritual life can be kindled in the human form of life. By careful handling of the smoke in the fire can be made to blaze. Therefore, the human form of life is a chance for the living entity to escape the entanglement of material existence. In the human form of life, one can conquer the enemy, lust, by cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance. Translation again, as fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb. Similarly, the living entity is covered by different degrees of this lust. And text 37, the Blessed Lord said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material modes of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. Hare Krishna, everybody. So good to see you. Thank you for tolerating me. And as we can read these purports together and get so much inspiration from this Bhagavad Gita as it is, which is the most wondrous book in the universe for all time and for all souls. So Krishna has identified the enemy, lust, and it's the sinful enemy of this world. So all the negativity we see in the world, all the discord and strife and everything, it's coming from lust and war lust and sexual lust and greed lust, and it's transformed into wrath, and so we have to put a stop. We have to put the brakes on lust in this world. It's out of control, and people don't even know that they're suffering. People don't even know that they've got the disease. So first you have to let people know that they've got a disease, and part of the disease is they're thinking they're the body, and they're thinking that it's their enjoyment that's number one, and then their next would be maybe their their friends and families' enjoyment, and then maybe their country. But at a certain point, they stop really caring. They don't really think about the soul. They don't necessarily care about someone across the world, let alone an animal across the world. Or so we have to transform ourselves into caring about every single soul, every single life form, and that has to happen. And if everyone cared about other souls, what a world it would be. And if everyone cared about God, if everyone loved God, their maker and their ultimate well-wisher, then what would the world look like? Could be amazing. And if everyone was humble enough to seek out a spiritual master and accept a spiritual master and take guidance, direct guidance from someone, an acharya, someone who's in the line of disciplic succession. And if decisions were made like that, instead of just whimsical decisions that people are making, and they're controlled by this lust, and they're controlled by their mind, and they don't know that the intelligence is higher than the mind. Translation of 40, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, which veils the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So where are the sitting places of lust? In the senses. In our senses, lust is sitting there, ready to be activated. The mind and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. So control over the senses, control over the mind, and ultimately control over the intelligence. Because the mind and the intelligence can play all sorts of tricks, but if you have control over them, your life can be successful. But only when we control the intelligence and the mind and the senses, there's gonna be lust sitting there and just ready to pop up, and it's gonna be sneaky, and we're all gonna be challenged at different times. And so we have to make progress in this life. We have to become purified. We have to make spiritual advancement. And maybe some people are thinking like they're not making any advancement. And maybe someone's thinking like, I'm neutral, I'm making a good amount of advancement. Or maybe someone's thinking I'm making a lot of advancement and I'm very advanced. All those people need to go to the next level, and we have to ask ourselves, what's stopping us from going to the next level? It's us. How do we get out of our own way? No, we can't look around and point fingers at anybody. We are the ones that are holding ourselves back. So how do we not hold ourselves back anymore? Text 39. Thus, a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. That's such an amazing point. We're getting the secrets of life here from Krishna. He's singing them to Arjuna. Lust is never satisfied, and it burns like fire. A fire in a forest never consumes enough wood, trees, matter, all these things. It's never satisfied. What do people think sometimes? They think, okay, let me just satisfy this lust one more time, and then I'll get over it. Tomorrow's a new day. No, you're just stoking the fire. So don't ever think that, let me just, one more time, one more go around with lust, and then I'll put it in my rearview mirror. Nope, not the way it works. When you do that one more time with lust, lust gets flamed up and the forest fire begins again. So no more one time, no more one time. Purport. It is said in the Manu Smriti that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment, just as fire is never extinguished by a constant supply of fuel. In the material world, the center of all activities is sex, and thus this material world is called Maithunya Agara, or the shackles of sex life. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Advancement of material civilization, on the basis of sense gratification means increasing the duration of the material existence of a living entity. Therefore, this lust is the symbol of ignorance by which the living entity is kept within the material world. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. So the center of this world is really sex, and the governments even like it, because sometimes the governments, they're very interested in the population, and they want to make sure they have like the societal controllers are looking at the population and making sure that we have enough population, like in 50 years, in 100 years. You don't want, sometimes they're saying we don't want the population to dwindle in our country, because then how strong is our country going to be? We need a strong army. So to have a strong army, we need a big population. And so they're encouraging sex life. Advertisers are encouraging sex life because it sells. As they say, sex sells. And so they're putting it on billboards. And even if we're trying to avoid these things, they're putting it on billboards. They're putting it just on advertisements. And they don't necessarily care about your spiritual life. They care about their bottom line, making money, or increasing the population and controlling the population. They actually don't want to just increase the population. Sometimes they also want to control the population. So sex life is inundating us. It's all around us, encouraging us, and they don't care if we're celibate, if we know the power of celibacy and how it increases brain function and just general overall well-being, and how we're a little bit more careful to just propagate the species, or to just go out and whimsically have sexual relations, which so many people are out there doing. Whimsical, right? Because it's a very important thing. You're saying, I want to propagate the species with you. I believe in this world, and I think the two of us together, we can propagate the species in that way. And it's a vote, and it's saying, yes, I believe in this world, and especially in the two of us. But when people whimsically have sex, it really cheapens it to where it has no value, right? The propagation of a living entity that a soul is going to reside in, you can't whimsically do that. And before the advent of certain birth control methods, of course, they were probably a little more careful. Now they say, oh, I won't have a child, or I won't get a disease. But in the past, people had to be very careful, because they knew if they did that, there would be another person to care for pretty soon, probably. And so people, had to be very, very careful. It's ordained in marriage for the propagation of children. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. And these bodies are kind of like a prison. They're kind of like a punishment. We wanted material enjoyment. We wanted to enjoy our senses, and we wanted to compete with God, and so we get these bodies, which is kind of like a punishment, but it can actually be a liberation for the devotee who can use the body to serve Krishna. Advancement of material civilization on the basis of sense gratification means increasing the duration of the material existence of a living entity. That's interesting, that if we're going to have more sense gratification, that means we're also going to have to increase the duration of life. And so people are thinking that, oh, I may not have to die by the time I get, time to leave the body in, so many years. By then they'll probably have technology, and I won't have to die. I can just put my consciousness in a computer, or I'll do so many other things, and so I won't have to die. But people have been thinking like this for a long time. And so we can use these bodies, we can use this human form of life as a chance to make real spiritual advancement. in a way that the lower worlds and the upper worlds can't make. And so it's a huge opportunity. So we've lost opportunities in the past, and we know what it feels like to lose an opportunity. So we don't want to lose this all important opportunity. Therefore, this lust is the symbol of ignorance by which the living entity is kept within the material world. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. Why is that? Because they're going to have to experience the other side of it. They have big ups, they're going to have big downs. And people don't like that so much. We naturally want happiness. We naturally want Sachid Ananda. And our soul is hankering after that. So anything else will not satisfy. So eternal life is what we're after. And that means our consciousness needs to be purified, and that all of our actions need to be in Krishna consciousness, and that we keep purifying our heart by chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The great mantra, the Maha Mantra that is for this fallen age of Kali, that is the only solution, is to chant. It's the most important thing is your relationship with the holy name, and keep chanting, and really go deep into your chanting of the holy name, really relish it, and really listen to the name, and sing the Lord's glories, and perform devotional service. Text 40. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, which veils the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Purport. The enemy has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul. And therefore, Lord Krishna is giving hints of those places, so that one who wants to conquer the enemy may know where he can be found. Mind is the center of all the activities of the senses, and thus the mind is the reservoir of all ideas of sense gratification. And as a result, the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. Next, the intelligent department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Intelligence is the immediate next-door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter, and thus with the mind and senses. The spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this as true happiness. This false identification of the spirit soul is very nicely explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Yasyatma buddhi kunape tridatuke swadi kala tradishu boma idyadi yat tirtha buddhi salite na kari chij Janish Abineshu Sa Eva Gokaraha. A human being who identifies this body made of three elements with his self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, who considers the land of birth as worshipable, and who goes to the place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge there, is to be considered as an ass or a cow. The intelligence department becomes intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego. So a lusty intelligence is knocking on the spirit soul's door, and it's saying, "No, you're the body. Don't you feel like the body today?" It's a daily challenge. It's not like once you hear the words, you are not the body. That's not the start, and then it has to really be worked on and confirmed, and it has to really sink in, and it's a daily challenge. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter, and thus with the mind and senses. So the intelligence is being a very tricky, fickle inhabitant, and lust is hiding there. lust and negativity is, it can hide in there and convince someone that they should identify with matter, that this is all temporary, right? Isn't that what the world is saying? This is all temporary. Just enjoy today. Don't worry about tomorrow. This world is temporary. It came from a big bang, and we're working on, traveling to Mars, and maybe someday we'll all move to Mars, and and then we can have eternal life. God doesn't have to give us eternal life. We're going to have to do it ourselves. We're going to have to our smartest scientists are working on this problem of eternal life, and we'll get there. We'll get to Mars. We'll get the eternal life just here in this material world, is what they're telling us. But people have been promised these things for eons and years, and hope in the wrong thing is very dangerous. One can spend their whole life hoping for something that's not even real, inconsequential, some implant or something that's going to give us an extended 30 years or something. Human life is traditionally known to be 100 years. So we have to do and we're not guaranteed 100 years, but we have to do the best we can with that 100 years. And really think about the future. And who goes to the place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge there is to be considered as an ass or a cow. So everyone should be seeking spiritual knowledge, and most people aren't, because it's not in their face, and they have to be reminded. It has to be reawakened sometimes, this spiritual seed that everyone has. But once it's reawakened, quite amazing things can happen. But people are not thinking about meeting people of transcendental knowledge, and they don't know where to start. They don't know what questions to ask. We have to start these relationships with people who need them, and let's be the people that start the relationships with a stranger, and get to know how to talk about spirituality with a stranger. Don't just talk about mundane things. That's the cycle. That's more samsara, and that's that vicious cycle. And so we have to get people to talk about spiritual things, and they have a chance. People of Kansas City have a chance to come here and meet a great Swami, and he loves he loves meeting people, and he actually cares about them so much, and he loves seeing people excited about spirituality and Krishna consciousness, and nothing pleases him more. And he actually takes an invested interest in every soul he meets. So people all around the world, try to go talk to a Vaishnav, try to go talk to a spiritual master, try to go talk to someone who might understand a few things about spirituality and about the real secrets of spirituality, because these are kind of open secrets. Anyone can buy these books, but the realizations you have, those are the open secrets. They seem so obvious to us, but the people out there, it's just like us not so many years ago. We just had no idea, and we may be in one path and then kind of just hit a wall or something, and so it just kind of goes away. It's just like a trend. Spirituality isn't supposed to be a trend in our life. It's not just a 3-month, 1 year trend. It's so tasty when you find the real thing. It's so tasty and transcendentally wonderful. You're just blown away. It's amazing. So we just have to open our hearts to people. Text 41. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Purport. The Lord advised Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization, and specifically knowledge of the self. Jnanam refers to knowledge of self as distinguished from non-self, or in other words, knowledge that the spirit soul is not the body. Vijnanam refers to specific knowledge of the spirit soul and knowledge of one's constitutional position and his relationship to the supreme soul. It is explained thus in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Jnanam Parama Guyam Me Yad Vijnana Samanvitam Sarahasyam Tad Angam Cha Grihana Garitam Maya. The knowledge of the self and the supreme self is very confidential and mysterious, being veiled by Maya, but such knowledge and specific realization can be understood if it is explained by the Lord himself. End quote. Bhagavad Gita gives us that knowledge, specifically knowledge of the self. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord, and therefore they are simply meant to serve the Lord. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So, from the very beginning of life, one has to learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. Lust is only the perverted reflection of the love of God, which is natural for every living entity. But if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the very beginning, that natural love of God cannot deteriorate into lust. When love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to the normal condition. Nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regular principles of devotional service. So, from any stage of life or from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness, devotional service of the Lord, and turn the lust into love of Godhead, the highest perfectional stage of human life. Yes, the higher self, and there's the self, and then there's the higher self. I remember um, before I first came to RVC and ISKCON, I remember I'd read the Bhagavad Gita, um, but even right around that time, I just started making all these notes about there's the higher self and the lower self. Uh, and then right in the middle of this document, I started coming to RVC. And so I've got this written thing where I start talking about how wonderful RVC is. And it's kind of like a diary of some of my first experiences at RVC. But I'll have to find that again. Well, how about some comments or questions from anybody tonight? Hare Krishna. Yes, Rishi Kumar. Did we see a hand over there? No.
You said we have to control the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. So how do we do that?
Well, sometimes we're going to have challenges. And so the challenge time is when it's really important to remember uh, pour your feelings into Krishna Katha and Krishna Kirtan and viewing the deities. So when we have those challenges, Krishna is trying to see, where do we run to? Where's the first place we run to when we're having those challenges? The parent hopes that we run, you know, a parent naturally hopes that a young child, when it's in danger, it should run to the parent. And so Krishna is trying to see where he's testing us a little bit. Where do we run when we're having those challenges? Do we run straight to lust and sin? And so we should have some kirtans and ready to go, and you can pour your heart and how you feel. Music is so wonderful because you can actually pour how you feel into a kirtan. Maybe sometimes there's minor keys in music that are traditionally known as sad keys, and then there's major keys that are traditionally happy. But sometimes I feel like sometimes the sad ones are the happy ones, and sometimes sometimes the minor ones are the happy ones, and sometimes the more major ones can be sad. So you can pour your heart into some kirtans that and sing to the Lord, and pour your emotions into your voice. Krishna can hear your devotion in your voice and your intention. And you can even maybe compose a kirtan. Try to put how you're feeling into an original kirtan, and maybe even record it, and you can go back to that, and come, if you can see the deities, one who remembers the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, after leaving the material world, take birth again, but attains my eternal abode, or Arjuna, Jan Makarma Chime Divyam. So be ready to open up a book when you're challenged, and your intelligence, your mind may say, no, I can't. Sometimes it'll just say, no, I can't. And so just crawl to a picture of Krishna, whatever you do. If you can come to the temple and view the deities, how beautiful they are at all ISKCON temples, and especially at RVC, they're so beautiful, Gauranitai, and they're so wonderfully decorated, all the flowers and jewelry, and it's a feast for the eyes. And it's meant to give you something beautiful, something transcendently beautiful to feast your eyes upon, instead of all of these advertisements that we see, and negative things. So crawl or drive or walk to and have pictures. That's why we have pictures in our rooms and things like that. Set the timer. A lot of times, if you can make it, a challenge can present itself, and a lot of times, if you just give it 5 to 15 minutes, if you can just withstand a challenge for 5 to 15 minutes, a lot of times it'll pass, right? So set the timer for 5 or 15 minutes, and do a little reading, a little kirtan, a little looking at the deities. And then once that 15 minutes is up, maybe you're past it. And then, but if not, set the timer for another 15 minutes, and it can be like that. But I'm learning so much from you all, and you all have such transcendentally strong muscles. So thank you for your association. I'm most inspired by you all so much. Any comments on that, or any further comments or questions tonight? All right, Bhagavad Gita as it is. Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.